Hello and welcome. I'm Richard Wolff, and you're watching our channel where we break down the connections between economics, politics, and the events shaping our world. Here we don't just look at the headlines, we dig deeper to understand what they mean for ordinary people, for economies, and for the future we all share. And today's story is one of those moments where the headlines can sound shocking. Ukraine's drones erased 120 Russian tanks in just 1 hour. And right after that, a Russian airbase was blown up. At first, it feels like just another piece of battlefield news, but when you look closer, you see that this isn't just about tanks or bases. It's about economics, about strategy, about how modern warfare is reshaping power in the 21st century, and that's exactly what I want to unpack for you right now. So let's begin at the surface level. Imagine the spectacle of 120 tanks, enormous machines of steel, wiped out in the span of an hour. For Russia, these tanks aren't just military hardware. They are investments, they are commitments of resources, labor, engineering, and logistics. Every single one of those tanks represents tens of millions of rubles, thousands of hours of work, and the hope of deterring or defeating an opponent on the battlefield. To see that erased in such a short time is not only a blow to Russia's military capacity, but also to the psychology of its leadership and its soldiers. And when Ukraine followed that strike by blowing up a Russian airbase, it sent a message that was not merely military. It was also political. You are not safe, your resources are not secure, and your strategy is failing. But now let me go deeper. Why drones? Why now? And what does this tell us about the larger system of war-making in the 21st century? Drones are not new. The United States pioneered their use in the Middle East, using them to strike militants in countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, and Pakistan. But what Ukraine has demonstrated is how drones can become not only tools of asymmetric warfare, where a weaker power uses creative tactics to fight a stronger one, but also how they can be scaled up into massive coordinated attacks that rival traditional air power. Think about it. 120 tanks destroyed in an hour is not the work of a single drone. It is the work of an entire system of drones, software, communication networks, and real-time intelligence sharing. It's the industrialization of drone warfare. And that has implications for the global economy as well, because wars increasingly depend on technology, microchips, and the logistics of producing machines cheaply enough to be used in such numbers. Now let's put ourselves in Russia's shoes for a moment. Tanks have long been symbols of military might. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union prided itself on having tens of thousands of tanks lined up across Eastern Europe. It was an image of overwhelming power. But that image belongs to the 20th century. In the 21st century, we are seeing the opposite. Large, expensive tanks are becoming liabilities when cheap, expendable drones can hunt them down in large numbers. Economically, this is a nightmare for Russia. Think about the cost exchange. A modern tank might cost $3, $5, even $10 million to produce and maintain. A drone, a fraction of that, maybe tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, but still orders of magnitude cheaper. So if a drone can reliably destroy a tank, the balance of economic efficiency shifts dramatically. For every tank Russia loses, Ukraine may only spend 1/10 or 100th of the cost to eliminate it. That's not just a battlefield problem, that's an economic disaster. And that's where the airbase comes in. Tanks can be replaced painfully over time. But an airbase, that is infrastructure. It represents years of investment, billions of dollars of sunk costs, and an assumption that it will provide security for decades. By striking an airbase right after destroying tanks, Ukraine sent a message to Russia and the world. Not only can we erase your expensive battlefield hardware, but we can also dismantle your deeper infrastructure. And remember, infrastructure is not just concrete and runways. It is also the logistics of fuel supply, ammunition depots, communications, and the confidence of the people who operate them. destroying an airbase reverberates far beyond the immediate damage. It undermines the sense of security within Russia's own territory, which is a profound psychological and political blow. Now, I want to link this back to economics again, because that is what I specialize in. Wars are not just fought with weapons. They are fought with money. They are fought with the capacity to produce, to sustain, and to replenish what is lost. When Ukraine destroys 120 tanks, Russia doesn't just lose military hardware, it faces the economic burden of replacing them. And in an economy already strained by sanctions, by reduced access to global markets, by inflation, and the decline of its currency, those costs are magnified. Each tank destroyed is not just a hole in the battlefield, it is a hole in the Russian budget, in its economy, and in its political credibility. And here's the part that often goes unnoticed. Russia is not fighting Ukraine alone. It is, in a way, fighting the industrial base of the West. Ukraine's drones don't appear out of thin air. They are made possible by Western support, by access to technology, by a flow of intelligence and material support. That means every tank destroyed is also a demonstration of how global economic alliances shape modern warfare. It's not just Ukraine versus Russia, it's Ukraine, supported by the economies of Europe and the United States, showing Russia that its traditional reliance on mass and scale cannot withstand the new economics of war. Think about what this means for the Russian people. Tanks destroyed, an airbase blown up. These aren't just military losses. They are losses of national pride, of the image of invulnerability that state propaganda has cultivated. And they also mean fewer resources available for civilian needs. Money spent replacing tanks is money not spent on hospitals, on schools, on pensions. This is the real cost of war, the diversion of resources away from the needs of ordinary people into the machinery of destruction. Let's step back even further. Why does this matter for the world economy? Because wars like this don't happen in isolation. They ripple outward. When Russia suffers losses, it doesn't just dig deeper into its reserves. It looks for support from China, from Iran, from North Korea. And those relationships come with their own costs and consequences. Meanwhile, the West funnels more resources into Ukraine, meaning budgets in Europe and the United States shift. Military-industrial companies see profits, and ordinary taxpayers foot the bill. So the destruction of 120 tanks and one airbase isn't just a story about military success. It is also a story about how economic priorities are rearranged on a global scale. And there's another angle, technology. Every time drones succeed against tanks, every time an airbase is destroyed by relatively cheap systems, the world's militaries take notice. Countries like China, India, and even the United States are watching very carefully because this changes their own economic calculations. If tanks are becoming obsolete, if air bases are vulnerable, then military budgets everywhere must adapt. That means less spending on the weapons of the past and more on the weapons of the future. And who profits from that shift? Technology companies, defense contractors, chip manufacturers. So in a sense, the destruction of those tanks is not just a victory for Ukraine. It is also a signal to investors, to industries, and to governments about where the money will flow in the years ahead. Now, but let me be very clear, none of this should be celebrated as if it were a game. Lives are lost in these battles. Soldiers, often conscripts, sit inside those tanks. Workers at that airbase have families. The destruction we're talking about here is horrific on a human level. But as an economist, I cannot ignore the reality that war is also an economic phenomenon, one that shapes the lives of millions beyond the battlefield. And in that sense, this single event, 120 tanks gone in an hour, followed by the destruction of an airbase, reveals a larger truth. The old model of military dominance, built on heavy steel and massive investments in traditional platforms, is crumbling in the face of cheaper, more flexible technologies. For Russia, that's a crisis. For Ukraine, it's a temporary advantage, and for the world, it's a lesson. Wars are no longer decided solely by who has the most tanks, planes, or soldiers. They are decided by who can align their economy, their technology, and their alliances most effectively. That's why this moment matters. It's not just about Ukraine, it's about the future of warfare and the global economic order. So when we hear that Ukraine erased 120 tanks in 1 hour and then blew up a Russian airbase, we shouldn't only be shocked by the numbers, we should be asking, what does this mean for the balance of power, for the sustainability of economies, for the direction of technology, and for the people whose lives are shaped by these choices? Those are the deeper questions, and those are the questions I hope you will carry with you as we continue to witness this conflict unfold. And let me add one final thought. Wars always teach us about the priorities of societies. In Russia, the priority has been to maintain an image of strength, even at enormous economic cost. In Ukraine, the priority has been survival, innovation, and the leveraging of outside support. In the West, the priority has been to weaken Russia while sustaining domestic political support for aid. These priorities tell us who benefits and who suffers, and as long as ordinary people, whether in Russia, Ukraine, or elsewhere, are the ones bearing the cost, we must never forget to ask who profits, who pays, and what alternatives could there have been to this endless cycle of destruction. That is what I wanted to explain today. The tanks, the drones, the airbase, they are the surface. The deeper story is about economics, about the cost of war, and about how the 21st century is forcing us to rethink what power really means.